Hello. Welcome to our latest episode of Journey to Life with my co-host Constance Fields and yours truly, ArletteJones-Lawson.
Hello.
Hi. We are talking about a really interesting topic today. We're taking a hard look at how the church can influence emotional abuse and intimate relationships, specifically within the Black community. And we are so excited and blessed to be joined by our special guest, Millicent Parker. Millicent is a licensed professional counselor. And Millicent, thank you so much for being here.
You are most welcome. Thank you guys for inviting me. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Let's get into this topic because this is an interesting topic that I don't believe is discussed enough in our community. And I was doing some research on the subject, and I found an article that was written in 2020 with the American Psychological Association that said that 40 to 60% of Black women report being subjected to coercive sexual contact by the time they've turned 18. Further, the article stated that 17% of Black women experience some sort of sexual violence other than rape by their intimate partner during their lifetime. And then the article referenced that Black women are also likely to be experiencing higher rates of psychological abuse, and that would include humiliation, insults, name calling, and coercive control. So when we're tying this all into the influence of the church, so what does the church have to do with any of this? Well, let's talk about it. So Millicent, my first question to you is, do you believe that these incidences of abuse are more or less likely to be reported by Black women?
Unfortunately, I would have to say it's less likely. Just looking at our history, for Black women, whether it was talked about in the homes or just looking at society, we feel the need to protect. And so we will, so that, the Black man won't end up going to jail again, or so that the community won't look bad again, things like that, we will just take on that abuse or the experiences and not want to talk about it outside of our home. A lot of us grew up with the belief that, what goes on in the house stays in the house. You don't talk about what happens outside of the house. And that's kind of, whether it was spoken or not in the home, that's kind of how our culture operates. And so, no, we're less likely to mention those things. And there are a number of reasons why as well, other than just cultural, the cultural norms. And so, that would include if the man goes to jail, then who's going to go to work, and that will impact my finances, or, the children and what will happen to them. Because if there's violence in the home, will you then come in and try to remove the children from the home? And we don't want that to happen either. So there are so many reasons why that's happening.
Yeah,
It tends to be like almost a generational passing down of that mindset.
I agree.
And
I've looked at a research. So just a little bit of background about me. I was married late 90s, early 2000s, and the marriage ended. And as I was talking to my pastor about the separation and the ending of the marriage, he said, well, Mill, it sounds like you've experienced emotional abuse. And I was like, what are you talking about, emotional abuse? So I'm a product of having experienced or witnessed, let me say it that way, physical abuse in my home growing up. And so I had already decided that will never happen to me. But the idea of emotional abuse and somebody just using their words to harm me, to impact me, or to, shut me down, never thought about it. And so when he mentioned that to me, I said, let me go and look, let me find out, let me get more information about this, because this was totally foreign to me. And so I think that we've come to believe that's just a part of life. That's just a part of what happens in a marriage. And in one of the studies that I was reading, young Black women were saying things like, so what, you've never been spanked before? When they talking about their partner. Never been spanked before? You know, that's just a part, that's what we do. A love tap? No, ma'am, that's not a thing for me. That's not allowed over here. And so, but that's just kind of a part of the culture. And it was kind of just nonchalant that, you know, it was stated like that's the norm, basically, for those things to happen. And so it's us understanding that that's not normal, that's not acceptable, and we can expect more.
Great. That was very good explanation of, you know, of kind of how you came to this topic and why it's important. And thank goodness it is, because it's not just important with you, it's important to a lot of people, you know, and a lot of people, you know, they, you know, verbal abuse, they don't rank that as high as physical abuse or emotional abuse. And, you know, all of that is, you know, is abuse. And I think that in this conversation, we're going to gain some insight on where the clergy factors into that. But I know that in a lot of African-American homes, and I know in the homes that I grew up in, you know, the church was kind of where you went to reset, and, you know, and your pastor's input pretty much kind of drove how you felt about the way you were being treated and your acceptance of it. So no, I mean, I think it's great. And that kind of leads me to my next question, which is historically, Black women as a whole have relied on faith to see us through a variety of situations. Can you talk about the history of the reliance on the clergy for our various emotional needs?
Sure. When we look at the church, it's been a staple in our community all the way back to slavery. I mean, that's the one thing that that's the one place that we could depend on. That was always there. And so for safety reasons, for camaraderie, for fellowship, for community, it was always at the church. And so, and with the belief that the minister or the pastor had that direct line to God. And so we wanted to make sure to be a part of that, but we just felt safe and we felt connected in the church. And the thing about the church is, I was reading an article that talked about the holy hush, because the church wasn't talking about abuse or any of that in the homes. It's like they didn't want to mention that part because they want you to focus on how God can help and how God is there for you. But we also need to be honest about the fact that abuse happens in the home. And it would be negligent of the church to not talk about that, and to look at how we can support women in either getting out of that situation or support the relationship and learning a healthier way to interact, to relate to each other. And so I think before it was a lot that the pastors and ministers, they just weren't equipped to deal with that. And so they were pray about it. They were using whatever scriptures came up for them, wanting the woman to basically take the brunt of it and take ownership of the relationship to keep it whole, to keep it intact. So just deal with it. You know, he's struggling, you know, he's got this going on. So just, you know, deal with that. And that's kind of how the conversations went. But recently, in the last decade or two, pastors have begun to acknowledge that they weren't equipped to handle those situations, and they've sought out help from counselors and from the mental health field. And especially when the pandemic hit, everybody was seeking help and support, and they realized that there's a lot of stuff going on that they just weren't prepared to handle. And so churches are more connected now than ever to have counselors available in the church itself, in the building, or having resources to connect the members to as well. And a lot of ministers are getting additional training now for themselves so that they can be equipped to offer healthy resources and not just pray about it, because we can do both. We don't have to separate counseling or resources from God.
Right.
I think it's safe to say that God made all these things available for us, and we can use all of them in tandem.
Absolutely. I think the pandemic, one of the things it did was amplify the abuse in the home. So it people were more isolated, and so and around abusive situations for longer periods of time. And I think that it became like it blew up. I mean, the spotlight on it started really shining. And I think that that's kind of helped people in general, but clergy as well, to realize that this is a bigger problem, and you can't just the holy hush, which I love that term. You can't just shush it away.
Right.
And two, let me ask you a question that's just kind of stems from that though. Do you think that in a lot of churches, they preach that the man is the head of the household, and and basically the woman is subservient to the man. And so in doing so, anything that man does that is considered abuse, do you think that there's more of a desire to not, bring attention to it for a variety of reasons, maybe not wanting your spouse or your significant other to look bad, or to for it to, especially in the church setting, because you want your spouse to present themselves in the best light, and disclosing any of that, of course, does the opposite. Do you think that that kind of factors into why women tend to not want to speak up about it?
I would agree. Again, I think that women, we have always wanted to make sure that we portray our families in the best light possible. And so if that meant, not speaking on something, not talking about it in public, not acknowledging it, then that's what we would do. And I think, like I said, with the church, before they just didn't know how to handle it, or some of them were just a part of the whole patriarchal line anyway. And so it's just the man is the head of the household. But now it's starting to tilt a little bit. And they talk about, they finish that whole scripture about following that the wife should follow the husband, because it also talks about following him as he follows God. And so if he's not following God, then I need you to make a quick left, because he's not going right. So
Right.
we need to make sure that, all of those things are in line. And women are very capable of being able to discern that. And we don't need another person to tell us, okay, this is not right for us, or I need to figure out a different way, or I need to learn how to just take care of myself. That's why we have feelings. That's why we have intuition. That's why we have the Holy Spirit whispering in your ear, however you want to phrase it, whatever you want to call it, but that's a real thing. And it's there for a reason. And so I always tell people, pay attention to that. It's trying to tell you something, not something about what do I need to do outside of myself, but what do I need to do for me about what's going on. But it always starts here. And I think for women, we have, for a very long time, allowed outside of us to dictate what we, or direct what we need to do with us, about what's going on the inside of us. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that we need to continue to look at, and that has been an issue in the church.
So I'm curious what your take is generationally on the differences.
I think that initially, like with the boomer generation, they were taught to listen to authority, follow what authority is saying. Authority is always right. And so that's what they grew up with, and that's what they still go by. If authority, if the police, if the president, if someone of higher ranking says something, then that's what it is. And so then the generation after that, X and all that, we saw how that went. We didn't like it. And so we wanted to do something different. Now, the issue sometimes is when the pendulum goes all the way to the left, it'll swing all the way back to the right. And it can be a little bit where, oh, I don't want to listen to anything anybody says. I'm just going to forge my own way. And so, but you're realizing, okay, I'm watching you get beat, physically or assaulted or verbally just talked down to, and I don't want to have that experience. And so I'm going to do it differently. And I think it's each generation looking at what the past generation did that forms, how they're going to move forward. And also what I'm teaching my daughter is you don't let anybody, just treat you any kind of way. You don't let anybody talk to you any kind of way, or say hurtful or offensive things to you without you correcting them. And so I think all of that plays into where we are now. And I think that that's why, like the whole George Floyd and the protests and all of that, it took that shift versus when it was, and I just had his name in my head. Can we all just get along? Rodney King. Now, with him, it was let's just get along. But with George Floyd, it's like, no, we have to make change. We're not going to just accept it the way that it was. And so there may have been some push for change with Rodney King, but that was more than ever when it came to George Floyd. And so I think just in looking with each generation, looking back at what happened to the past generation and that generation wanting to instill something different in the next, that's kind of how we got to this point. And people basically just getting tired of silence because the silence has harmed us so much. It makes no sense not to talk about what's going on because it's the not talking that keeps us stuck in this position. It keeps us hurting. It keeps us bogged down and not being able to fully live life.
Yeah. So. And even with sexual abuse, I'm sorry, Mom, even with sexual abuse, that can happen in a relationship, in an intimate relationship too. And I don't think that that's talked about enough either. It's kind of just like, oh, he wants it, so I just roll over even if I'm asleep and let him do it.
Right.
Whatever. That's not okay.
That's not okay. And it's important for women to know that just because you're in a relationship, everything's not acceptable. Everything is not, it's not a free for all. You still have rights and you still get to say what you will and will not participate in because it's your body and you get to decide. And that's what I tell my daughter all the time. You get to decide how you interact with this person and what goes on in the relationship. It's not just their decision because this is you and it's your body. You get a say about your body at all times. So.
Yeah, we're not property. I mean, and I think that that's one of the things that, that I think we're starting to understand it a little bit more, but that's been a problem is that, we've not felt like we were our own, and especially in a marriage, because, you are your husband's, but it's a partnership, you know what I mean? Right. And so the same respect and reverence that you give to your partner, you should get that same respect and reverence in return. And it's not balanced when you don't see yourself as a person and you see yourself as being owned by your partner, because then you're likely to, fall into whatever will they have. And you don't, you lose yourself, I think, in that.
Exactly, you do. You lose yourself, and you
Mhm.
can't tell where you begin and where they
Mhm.
end. And
Mhm.
is this my thought, or is this something that they told me to think? And and
Yes.
so and that's a real thing. And people, they really do. They get lost in relationships. They get lost in other people because they forget that they get to decide who they are and what they want, and they just go with whatever the person that they're with, or whatever group that they're with. They just go with that.
Yeah, that's a powerful distinction too. Let me ask, and you've answered this partly, I think, already, but in your research, what did you uncover as a major reason why women that are abused or in abusive relationships tend not to seek out divorce or to end of the relationship, that they just stay?
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's financial. They don't have the means. Either they're the stay-at-home mom, or their job just would not cover the care of the kids and the house and all of those things. So a lot of times it's financial. And like we were talking about, getting lost in yourself, you don't believe that you can exist outside of this. And that's a real thing. You really can't see yourself outside of this relationship. You don't know who you are. And so you have to find your own identity again. And then sometimes it's the status. There are some women that really just want to be married. They just want to be in this relationship or in a relationship. And so they stay for that reason, because they have bought into the belief that you're not a whole person if you're not in a relationship, if you're not married. And so they'll do what they have to do to maintain that relationship, to maintain that status.
I used to hear just years ago when I was growing up, the thing that women used to say, and I know my mama used to say it a lot. I can do bad all by myself, and you would think, when she say that fostered a sense of independence. But a lot of women say that or said that, but those were just words. Their actions didn't show that they believed that they could do bad all by themselves. So it made it like anything isn't better than nothing. Some people are like,
a piece of man is better than no man at all. That's what they believe.
Exactly.
That's what their actions say.
That's what they're. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, again, that's why it's important for us to know who we are, to figure out, what do I like? What do I want? What do I need? And that's just as important as the other person. That's just as important as this relationship that I say that I'm in. Because we so want to be in the relationship, we get lost in just the thought of the relationship. Sometimes it's not even about the other person. It's just because I want to be in this relationship. And so I am in love with the thought of being in love, not with the dude or the woman or the person. I'm just in love with the thought of being in love. I'm going to roll with that for a while. Yeah.
I'm curious, what are some key elements that Black women can recognize to tell themselves, okay, this is abuse and this is not normal in a relationship? And then the second part of that is, how do they approach their pastors about this?
So some things to recognize is, if you're in a relationship, and of course, if they're belittling you, saying just hurtful things to you or about you, that's one thing. And I know sometimes people will want to act like, they're just playing, they're just kidding. The problem is, I don't kid like that. I need you to be, say positive things. Let's encourage each other. Especially if it becomes the norm. Pay attention to that. If you're in a relationship and that person begins to isolate you, they don't want you around your family. They don't think you should hang out with this particular friend, even though that friend has been around longer than you, or they don't think that this person is good for you. So if they're starting to isolate you from your connections, from your the people in your life, your support group, that's a concern. If the person gets moody, or their moods just kind of change out of nowhere, and one minute they're happy and things are great, the next minute they're volatile and they're raising their voice, and they haven't hit you yet, but there have been some times where it's close. Pay attention to that. Because emotional abuse is kind of like, if we look at substance abuse, where marijuana is the gateway to other drugs, emotional abuse would be the gateway to physical abuse.
Yeah.
It's coming. And it may not be, today, this month, this year, but if that continues, the belittling, the name calling, the yelling, that it comes with that. And not taking your thoughts or your feelings into consideration. And that becomes the habit or the norm, just not taking what you want or what you need into consideration, and instead telling you, this is what you need, this is what you want. Dressing you. I think you would look nice. Now, if you go out and you buy a dress for me or a pair of pants or whatever once or twice, but if you want to redo my entire wardrobe where I can't decide what I want to wear, then you're becoming a little too possessive. Yeah. So things like that. Those are the important things, or the things that come up for me. And the second half of the question, give it to me again.
How would you, or what would you recommend would be a way for Black women to approach their pastors about this topic if they felt like they were being abused, or if they were unsure? Should they separate out, okay, I'm going to talk to my pastor about this, I'm going to talk to my therapist about this, or should they come to the pastor about everything? And then it be on the pastor to be like, oh, you really should talk to a therapist about this.
Well, as a therapist, I'm definitely going to say go for the therapist first.
Yeah.
That's important, because in that space they are equipped and ready to support you and to help you to walk through where you are and what's the next steps with that. Now, if you're in a space where you're really connected in the church, and the pastor is like really a part of your life like that, then have a conversation with them when you feel comfortable. But I would definitely say talk to a therapist, start there. And so what's a good thing now also is that you can look for a therapist that has pastoral care background, that has training. That would be me. You can do both. And you can have the space where you can talk about your beliefs and your thoughts and your spirituality, but then talk about how that coincides or how that is connected to just everyday life, and how do you make those two work? Because that's really the struggle. Because I know what God says, but I know what I'm experiencing as well. And so how do I marry the two? And so, but a lot of churches now, thankfully, they either have a counseling staff, or they have more connections than they have ever had, more resources. And so if you feel more comfortable with the church, then go to a person that you feel comfortable with and just kind of talk about where you are in your relationship and that you have some concerns, and how can they support you in that. Now, also keep in mind, if the partner is at the church and he, has a role, a major role, then take that in consideration for yourself as well, because you want to go where you'll feel supported. And so if you have some concerns about that, then that may not be the best space for you. You may want to look outside of that. But there are so many options available now. So, you want to really think about whether that's the safest space for you. And there may still be, people in the church that you can go to who can support you through this, but make sure that wherever you're going, it's with a person or people who support you and who are open to hearing where you are and willing to walk with you in that space, regardless of what it is.
And so what are ways that that we can empower women to kind of reclaim the power that they've always had, but maybe not realized?
So when I think about that, because I was trying to put some words together before I started, one thing that comes to me is making sure that we let women know you're not responsible for everything and everybody. You can't be responsible for the community. You just can't. We've tried to do it for too long, and it's weighing us down, and we don't get to live when we do that. So give yourself permission to no longer be responsible for how he feels or how she feels or how they feel. Take responsibility for you. Give yourself permission to do that. And really, a lot of times people need to do that. They have to give themselves permission to not care. I don't care how you feel about me getting help for myself. Stop trying to play God. You can't be everything for everybody. I know it's been kind of pushed on us, shoved on us, and not explicitly, but that we should be able to just maintain everything at all times. And just pile some more on, just pile some more on. We can't do everything. And so it's time for us to give ourselves permission to not try to do everything, but to step back and honestly begin to look at, what do I need in this moment? How can I take care of myself? Another thing is making sure that we check in on our friends and our loved ones to see if they're actually doing something new, trying some new things, challenging them to step outside of themselves, because it's in trying new things and doing new things that we feel invigorated. We feel, there is some creativity in there. There's some life in there somewhere. And so don't just let them say that they're going to do something. Okay, I'm going to start, like I make soap every now and again. And so I say, okay, I'm going to make a batch or two of soap because I like to do it. It makes me feel creative. I get my creative juices flowing, and I just feel good. And so I tell my sister, I'm going to make a batch of soap over the weekend. Now, my sister's really good. If I tell her I'm going to make a batch of soap on Sunday night or Monday morning, did you make the batch of soap? But see, I'll just put it off and be like, I'll do it next week. But that's something that gives me energy. It gives me life when I do that. And so encouraging them to do more of that so they can begin to feel good about themselves, feel energized, feel connected to who they are. Do that. That's empowering for them. And us staying on top of them to take care of themselves is empowering for them.
I wanted to say it's kind of holding the people that we care about, holding them accountable to what they say that they want to do.
Holding them accountable to taking care of themselves and figuring out what that looks like. Because we talk about it all the time, but really, what does that really mean for each individual woman? And it's taking time to figure that out. Is because when we are in our best space and in our best place, mentally, physically, emotionally, then we can offer everybody else so much more.
Mhm.
But we run and we run and we run until we have nothing left in the tank to offer anybody. And then
Yeah.
they're looking at us like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Why you can't help? Why you can't carry these 5 other elephants? I know you have 10 on your back right now, but I got 5 more.
Right.
Well, we tend to want to back burner ourselves. So we tend to always put ourselves at the end of the line, and that might be fine if the line is progressing and you're moving up
Right.
the line. But problem is all these other things every day pushes us back to the back of the line that we put in
Right.
front of us. It's kind of a saying that I love that says, you can't light yourself on fire to keep somebody else warm.
Right.
You know what I mean?
True. Now we'll try though.
Oh, yeah.
We'll give you my
For sure.
last, and then I'm walking around with nothing. But you have something though?
Well, Millicent, we have really appreciated this conversation so much. Is there anything else you would like to share or add that you didn't have the opportunity to say?
I think we pretty much covered everything. I am definitely glad that we are being more honest about what we believe and how we've been operating in the Black community. I know when I started way back when looking at emotional abuse, there was maybe a couple of hundred studies out. And even with those, they were very small, a small study group. So 15, 20, 30 people. Well, you can't really do any real research with that small population. But thankfully, more people are willing to participate in research studies so that we can get more information about how we can be best supported and helped and how we've been impacted. So I'm definitely glad about that, and the fact that we continue to move forward with understanding what we need and being honest about that. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to us continuing to advance in all of those areas as a community.
Constance, did you want to add something?
No, I'm good. I thought this was great.
This has been a very, very powerful episode, and we certainly appreciate all the things that you shared, and hopefully and prayerfully it will enlighten people, and we focus on women, but there are some men that are in this similar situation as well. So to just recognize, your power, and that, that you're entitled to be treated with respect and love, and and all of the tools that were shared here. We just wanted to resonate with our listeners, and that they find a way to seek help through a mental health professional or the clergy. And fortunately, in this conversation, we have discovered that our clergy now are becoming more enlightened in in this area, and recognizing the importance of factoring or folding in some type of mental health component to be able to help their parishioners. So, prayerfully things are changing. If there's anybody out there, like what was shared earlier, that are in a position where your significant other that is being abusive is in your church and in a higher position in your church, seek help in a different congregation and with a different practitioner, a different counselor, somebody that can be neutral, that can speak truth to you, and can help kind of guide you. So we have definitely enjoyed this, and we thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode, and take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.